Welcome to the Holiday Podcast, where we sit over homemade challah on Friday afternoons here at my table. I'm your host, Tammy Priest, a Jewish follower of Jesus, and it's great to be with you again today on this Friday afternoon, Shabbat Eve, as we look at intersections between the Old and New Covenants. So the way that I've managed to stay on track so far this year with my daily Bible reading is by listening to it on my Bible app. So a quick plug for the Bible app from YouVersion, which has this option for dramatic narrator, and it really brings the scriptures to life in a different way. So anyway, this week I was walking outside in the record-breaking warm February weather here in North Carolina, listening to Leviticus. I know it's not everybody's favorite book. In fact, it's probably most people's least favorite book, because it's basically one long monologue from God with rules for everything from sacrifices to fabric to infectious diseases. But as I was listening to all the chapters about all the sacrifices, one phrase kept replaying itself: pleasing aroma. God said that as the smoke would rise from the sacrificial altar, it would be a pleasing aroma to him. Now, it probably was not a pleasing aroma to the people. So I want you to just imagine day in and day out, 24/7, 365, the sounds and the smells and the sights of all these sacrifices. These animals were being killed and flayed and then burned up on the altar. And so the sacrificial system was this continual reminder of sin and brokenness. Brokenness in our bodies, brokenness in our relationships, brokenness in our faith, brokenness in everything. And it all needed to be covered by blood. And so this treadmill of animal sacrifices was a very tangible, nonstop reminder of humanity's need for atonement. And so as I kept listening to that phrase over and over again, 17 times in Leviticus, it made me wonder why this was so pleasing to God, if it could be so heartbreaking to us, to his people. So my confusion over this contrast this week prompted me to come home and look up the Hebrew. And as a side note, whenever we have a question about things that God says, don't dismiss it, dig into it. God's not afraid of our questions. He welcomes them because it means that we're trying to understand him better. Okay, so I came home, I looked up the Hebrew for that word pleasing, and it's nikoach, and it means soothing or quieting. Not pleasing as in, oh, that smells good. But I realized that all these sacrifices didn't make God pleased as in, I love that specific smell. It soothed God because his people were doing the things to be restored. Each sacrifice meant that people were trying to draw near and to be reconciled. Every time a sacrifice went up from that altar, it was communicating, I want to be restored so that I can draw near to your holiness. God's children were acknowledging the rift between us ever since the garden and every single day since then. And they were choosing to do something about it, choosing to draw near the way that God had explained to them. And God's response was to be soothed by their faith and repentance, and in turn to give mercy. So this connection between the old and new. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he says, Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. The Messiah became that that fragrant offering on our behalf on the altar of the cross. And it was soothing to God, not because the Father wanted Jesus to die, but because he wanted to be reconciled to humanity, the people that he lovingly and beautifully created and continues to create. And that's exactly what the Messiah accomplished on that altar. And so when we claim Jesus, when we choose to cover ourselves in his forever sacrifice, then in the words of Paul to the Corinthians later, we become the aroma of Christ to God. Now, I know Paul talks about what that means in terms of our witness in that passage, but that verse also is really what all of those pleasing aromas of Leviticus were about. God is pleased, he is soothed when the brokenness that has separated us from him is mended. And so when we hear those words, all those pleasing aromas of the sacrificial system, we can remember why they were soothing to God, even though the sacrificial system is so foreign to us today. And we can be profoundly grateful that now, instead of being stuck on that non-stop treadmill, we can know that Jesus' forever sacrifice has risen up to heaven. And that the God of all creation is soothed because we've been restored to him for good. I mean, that's how much we mean to him. And so I encourage us all to spend time trying, we never will be able to, but just to try to fathom the depth of God's love for us, for you and for me, in that being reunited with us is a soothing aroma to the God of the whole universe, every single day, and on this Challah day.